So this is the annual ranking of the titles I've read throughout the year. There might be an extra VN or two edited in since I still got like a month left, but I'm busy with Disco Elysium and Monochrome Mobius is coming out soon. Anyways, all of these titles will be shortened, otherwise it'll take like 3 hours, and I'm not editing through that because fuck that. Titles will be color coded, it'll just be on the screen. So Suzukuri Dungeon, the gameplay is kind of fun for a while, but eventually gets annoying, and that's also the same thing with the plot. Feels like it all dropped off around 30% the way through, where they kind of stopped goofing off and it's all about needing money and the main character just wanting to make dungeons and needing money to do that, so they're all cooperating. Almost all the CGs are just from H scenes. There's some level spikes, and any strategy outside of complete burst is completely useless. At least for the most part. The second extra map that you'd assume is there to help you level up is actually harder than anything in the main story, so what the fuck that's even there for? Overall, it's fine, but it's also not something I would ever retry, or if I can go back and pass out, like, yeah, don't even try this one. I just give it a 6. Jeanne and the Clocktower actually has some potential. The OSC tracks are great, but a lot of the H scenes were not. It's also an isekai, and I'm not generally into that genre, but at least the main character is generally trying to go back to his own world, and a lot of it probably works just because the main character isn't just a total loser this time. He has military training, he's fighting World War II, he just wants to go back into the war, so he's helping out all these new people to actually just get an attempt to reach his own goals. Sure, the main on-screen villain is garbage, and I think that's my main gripe, but also the sub-villains are actually pretty decent, actually fun, they're pretty interesting. I think if you were raised Christian or Catholic or Protestant, whatever, but also not really anal about all the details, I think you would actually like this more, and I think that's like the potential of it. Like, there's just like really cool ideas going through this, or if you just like John Dark, I guess. So for Christmas Tina, I also think this had a decent potential, but it's kind of weird in its own way, because I didn't feel like it was going anywhere for a decent chunk of it. The male voice actor needed a better mic, or at least have him step back, because he was always peeking. It's just about these two people that don't speak the same language, but both got the same job, just squatting on this abandoned station. I did enjoy what they did have, and it went into a different direction than I thought it was going. Well, how the generic approach is going through, so like, oh, that's pretty cool how they did it. A lot of it's more of the, I think this one would be better off as a movie than a VN. And the main gripe is like a lot of it just didn't kind of make sense after a while, because in the movie everything would be short and you're like, oh yeah, of course they still don't understand each other's language, it's only been like an hour. But this one, it's been like 5 hours, and I think it's a couple of months have passed since you still don't know the basics of each other's language yet. Holy shit, you guys are useless. They have dictionaries and everything to translate, they don't know what to do shit, it just pissed me off halfway through. But overall, yeah, it's like if it was a movie, I think I would like this a lot more. Primal Hearts and Love Duction are both out of 5, because they kind of have the same issue where they don't handle the genre shift well, and it just gets annoying because of it. Primal Hearts was a MOA game that shifted halfway through the VN to then just having like a 10/90 split between scenes and porn. Love Duction was a cool game throughout, and then it became coherent out of nowhere during the routes, but they're just generic and could have just stayed with everybody being retarded. The True Route brought it back, but the last extra scene was also like felt tacked on, so it didn't have to be there. If it was done well, then it'll be a different case, but it's not. It's like, okay, slap it in, right? Then there's Doukyuusei, which is like my first 8 in here, and it's mainly for nostalgia. It just brought back old memories of trying to figure shit out on a convoluted map on these old ass games. Though this one was pretty fair in comparison, outside of like maybe 2 routes, you just explore the map and interact with characters and their respective plots continue, and you just keep on going until you hit enough flags like, oh shit, I hit a route, or you fail everything and it's still funny. Some of the routes could be pretty decent if they were focused on, but mainly the humor carries everything. It's also kind of sad, like, I've seen people beat this in like 8 hours or whatever, and a lot of it's like, yeah, it's possible if you just skipped every kind of choice you have and all you do is the talking, all you use is the walkthrough, because there's a lot of things you can just look at and it'll do some humor shit and explain, oh, what are you looking at? And you can skip all that because it's not important, but a lot of humor comes from that as well. So it feels like you missed half the game if you just speedrun this thing, and if you use a walkthrough, it's kind of sad, because you won't get the same experience as other people. It's kind of different from other VNs where, yeah, using a walkthrough will only change much because you're still just getting a narrative, but in this one, like, most of the fun is going through it yourself. So this one is Psychedlica of the Black Butterfly. I'm just going to call it Butterfly, it's easier. It's an Otome game, and it's been a while since I've read one. I thought it started out pretty good until the gang stopped being together and constantly shit-talking each other, and I had to concentrate on their respective routes, and everything just went to shit. Some routes were pretty good, some were awful. If the second half kept the energy of the first half, I'd probably put in like a higher 7s. But overall, because of that, some of the characters I did not like, some of them felt kind of creepy, and they're kind of like, oh, they're popular because they're kind of creepy. And I was like, oh, fuck off. But you kind of have to do it to get every routes. It's like, oh, now I have to go through these stupid things. So it's one of those things like, like other VNs where if you hate the Lodi, but the Lodi is needed to get the true routes, like, oh great, now I have to read through this thing. It's the same kind of experience. Then there's Hello Lady. The main issue on that one is the quality of the routes. It's not all bad, but it's padded up the ass and I got bored, especially in the 4th route. And that's kind of sad since I really like Kamyu, which is from the same company, and it also had issues, but overall I went out with a better experience. What saved it was the expansions and the main character, otherwise it would have been a 6. And honestly, I still kind of want to put it as a 6, but like, there was enough good in it to make it into a 7. And then there's Evenicle 2, honestly it's just not as good as the first one. Sure, the plot is better, kind of. The ending kind of dropped off compared to the first one, but otherwise, yeah, it was a better experience. In this one, the experience was padding. A lot of fucking padding. And a lot of it's based like, well, you need to level up. Why? Because you have limited healing. You can't do any of the strategies. Everything is just burst. You have to beat everything on these limited amount of turns because when you run out of healing, you're just fucked, right? So a lot of it's based on gold and getting on equipment. So everything is built around doing the farming shit. So it's like, oh, one of your characters is sick. Now you have to find this item anywhere in the fucking map. Okay, go there. I was like, well, what's the purpose of me walking all there? It's to get more battles and to get more experience, to get more gold, to get the fucking equipment to keep on going. And I can go a long time on this ship, actually make a post on it. You know, I'm just skipping it because otherwise it's going to be really long. And then the opposite end was Castle Meister. This one was actually pretty fun. I liked it more than Kamidori, even though the world building is worse. Almost all of your units actually stay relevant this time, and some of them actually became powerhouses or staples in your own team. There's a lot of shit going on. You don't have to build the clothes anymore, but now you can level up your spirits, which is only 4 of them, but you can also build the spirits around the summoner. Actually, it has more strategy going to it. It's pretty fun. The post game's a little bit worse. I'm actually making a video of it. It's probably out before this video comes out anyway. It'll probably be like 20 minutes long, and you just go for that one. The one thing I would say is like the main ending or the good ending is actually worse than the bad ending in this case. Not in terms of like, oh, better things happen in bad ending. It's like, no, it just felt better written. There was more emotion into it. So like, alright, that's pretty cool. Post game does suck though. And then there's Kinkoi. I had this as an 8, but I kind of want to move it to a mid-7. It's mainly a Moe VN outside of the last route that references and somewhat jokes on the other routes. I think the route is pretty good and it carries the rest of the VN, but honestly, that's not a very fair assessment on the whole grade. It's like you have to attach to everything, right? There's a thing about improving yourself and being golden, but it's not really well done half the time for most of these routes. If there's only like 2 routes, like the Sylvie's route and the last route, and migrate every other point from the other routes into these 2 routes, I would put this maybe into a 9 or at least a high 8. So here's the Utawa trilogy. So I have the OG at an 8 because the midsection felt aimless compared to the beginning and the ending. A lot of the main villains didn't have any presence to them, and one of them just leaves and pops back out way later, which is probably like in a few months in their time. It gets explained, but it still felt weird. Otherwise, yeah, I think this VN was fucking amazing, but the whole midsection, not great. The second is more of a stepping stone to the third. It felt a lot more tropish than the first one and just feels weird because I know there was multiple years between these two. It's like, why did it get worse? A lot of its issues is just a lot of these scenes feel redundant, where it's just spamming the same joke multiple times because it's all just shitting on Haku a lot. And the thing is, like, if you cut most of this, the experience would be a lot better and it'll only be like maybe 2 to 3 hours shorter. Also, the final boss had a huge stat spike and it was pretty annoying to complete compared to the rest of the game. Everything outside of that was great, like I said before, and I'd give it like a 9 if it was just that. A lot of the main story points was fucking great. It's just, for some reason, they wanted to spam this one joke and it just pissed me off. I'd give the third one a little 10 if they cut out the last third and it took its time with the sequel, because the final villain just felt rushed and the last couple stages felt samey and some of them were exactly the same fucking units, or at least in the story-wise they're the same fucking units, and it just pissed me. It's like, oh, it's you again? Fuck off. I don't care anymore. It just felt like a really downgrade in terms of quality compared to what else it was given on there. The finale was still great, but that's only the last half hour, and it's like, even then I felt the first one did it better than the last one in some parts, and especially in like how it's stacking up. It felt like it was going up and down a lot more than the OG, which was just like a complete static of just 10 the whole time. So I gave Stella 7 at first because I actually liked most of the routes compared to the other Yuzu titles. Khan is basically a derivative of a route of a different title, but they cut down the padding on it by a lot. But then I remembered how bad the common route was and how the pro tag is one of the more boring ones from their catalog. So it gets shot down back to a 6. Though it could be like a 6 potential type thing, but right now I feel like it's just a 6. And then there's Atsuki no Goei. This is more of a variable depending on what's important to you. If you go solo on comedy, just like how I'd rate Doukyuusei on the Nappa experience, then it's like an 8. If it's like your style of humor, or even a 9. The plot is kind of trash and I put it like a 5 or a low 6. So I'm just leaving it as like a 6 or 7. It's the first part of the 3, but I think the second was just a fan disc. But I brought that up mainly to say it wasn't that great of an exposition piece either. So it's probably not like that serviceable to the next one anyway, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong because I haven't read the sequel, so who knows, right? So then there's 13 Sentinels. There's some little controversy. It's like, oh, it's not a VN, it is a VN. It's like, that's also semantics, but yeah, it is. It's more based on how much you value structure than anything else. It's like, well, structurally, text box isn't there, fuck, it's no longer a VN. It's kind of whatever. It's kind of iffy. I felt like it was kind of overhyped, but then again, I generally rate things lower than average anyway. Overall, I had a fun time, but some of the characters felt kind of pointless, and maybe they should be rewritten to other sections. Like to the point where it's like, well, there's one character holds 3 characters, and sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't, depending how important they are. Because otherwise, like, yeah, why are you here? Why did I spend 3 times just fucking finding a sandwich? Just pissed me off there. But my main gripe was that some scenes felt incomplete. It doesn't really intertwine with the rest, but you get what they're implying. A lot of this is based on like the last 10% of the freaking VN, because the beginning was amazing. It's just, yeah, it's the last 10%. It felt like there needed to be a little more connection to it. But otherwise, yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. Summer Pockets was kind of iffy halfway through because it focuses on 2 themes. Summer basically key. The key section is closer to the Clannad level compared to how blunt Little Busters was, but it's more similar to Air than anything else. But it also felt like it was written just because it was staple for key. The routes that concentrated more in the summer felt a lot more vibrant than the rest. I think the new routes were pretty good, but the only one that actually shined out was Shiki's. All in all, I felt like they were trying to create the same spark as the older titles when they had their own magic going on and just like, fuck it, let me do 2 things. I'm still giving it an 8. Cyanotype Daydream, I originally gave this an 8 because I wasn't really into the second case, and I'm still in that headspace where like, yeah, I still don't like it, but overall, there was nothing relatively wrong with it, and it works on a technical sense, so I bumped it back to a 9. The first case is still the best, while the last case is closely behind, solely based on some of the scenes I felt were just there to start drama. Otherwise, I put the last case as the highest. So in Higurashi, I really like Chapter 7. It was actually my favorite out of all of them. And it's kind of funny because before that, my favorite was Chapter 3. And if you play, you know, like, oh, what's the only similar in there? It's like, oh shit, it's this one character. And the thing is, I hate this character overall, but her arcs are pretty good. I felt like Chapter 6 had too much padding near the end, and Chapter 5 was well done, but I still remember the main points from the first season of the anime from like 10 or 12 years ago, whatever it was. It's maybe more like 16. But anyways, yeah, I didn't really have the same hype because like, well, I already know most of these things were happening. The one thing that was cool with it, because I did see the anime a while back, the first 4 chapters are just kind of more interesting because all these things that were placed around, that was like, oh, they're kind of subtle. It's like, oh, I understand what they're going for. This is pretty cool. I kind of like Chapter 8, but there's parts in it I was kind of iffy to the point where I just prefer Chapter 7. I'm writing something on it. It's probably going to be on YouTube, but overall, I wish things were changed. And the thing is, like, even the author was like in the epilogue section, it's like, hey, this is my idea, and I know there's other ideas, and hey, this is one I like the most, but doesn't really retract from your ideas. I'm like, hey, that's pretty cool of you. All right, cool. Amatsutsumi would have been like an 8 or maybe even a high 8 if they took out like 2 H scenes from each character and just added as like an extra in the main menu. Their routes are glorified fan discs that take like 10% of the actual plot as hostage. Otherwise, it has a great start and then varying degrees of subpar to decent routes until a pretty good ending minus some ideas that felt were pretty dumb. Even the final ending, there's like 2 arcs, I guess, and the first one was great, but not assumed, but I know there's gonna be people that are like, oh, I hate this kind of trope, and other people are like, oh, this trope's great. But a lot of it's like, well, in the second ending, those things that were introduced and they're just not brought up later on. It kind of annoyed me, but that's why it's like at a 7 now. I was kind of expecting a shit show for Edelweiss since it has a certain negative stigma due to the initial translation, but I had a lot of fun with it. It's got language that really isn't safe anymore and probably get canceled to liking it or whatever, but it really feels like some 80s or 90s guys just had like a barbecue and just hashed out a plot just so they can have some random cast just be retarded and fuck around in their plot. The routes are mainly passable. Everyone I talked to had like a different favorite route. Mine was Mizuki's, but I didn't actually like her character, and that's kind of fun because my favorite character was Rin, who had the worst route. No one in my group liked Rin's route. And then there's Edelweiss Fantasia, which is also 7 because it technically has less hijinks, but the routes are better this time around, so it just rounds itself back to a 7. And it's mainly the hijinks is more focused on these 2 characters instead of like the whole cast, but it still works. So for Imasugu, I was actually expecting more out of this one. It has the same writer as Koichoko, but it didn't really have the same spark for me. There were some threads that didn't really go anywhere, and there were some cliches that felt like they were just trying to do spoofs out of it, but then they actually went along with it. It's like, oh, you fucked it up. The focal route is the weakest of the bunch, and that was my favorite character, which is weird because it's the one that had the least amount to do with the title itself. There's nothing really wrong with it, but there's nothing in there that stands out from other titles, so it's like, yeah, it's the same as the other ones. Dohna Dohna lives and dies with its gameplay loop. You can save scum a lot to save some time around, mainly to get the right stats or to get the right upgrade materials without wasting a day. The plot itself was working well too, but it drops the ball by the last third or so. Not like there was much going on, but it had some really neat ideas. They didn't really follow through with it. Also, the gameplay is relatively easy and the items basically break the game. It's mainly a game for horny people, but it actually has a better spacing between scenes than a large amount of MOA games that I've gone through due to its gameplay loop. On gameplay, art design, and pacing between gameplay, porn, and plot alone, it's like an 8 leaning towards a 9. But having to waste time trying to get some of these upgrade materials was annoying. My fun note out of this one is I kept the first talent that you have to get throughout the whole fucking game. I barely used her. I think I used her like 15 times, but she was there and it was a fun experience to do it that way. She just became like a resource pit. So Interview with Bay is just a fan disc. It's decent. It's fun because of Bay, but I feel like he wasn't as funny as he was in the main game. But I generally disliked Ren, so maybe I just don't like how they handle the main character's writing. The fights were also boring in comparison, but that's kind of fair considering the length of it that's so small. Part of my rating is how I view edgy, where you think it's cool when you're in your early teens and it's stupid in your early 20s, but then it's just funny just laughing at how stupid it is in your late 20s or early 30s or even your early 20s, depending how much you swap. Without it, it's more like a 6. I was hoping more for Royale, but it's just kind of normal. Sure, everybody's retarded, but the routes still have structure, and that was something I thought it wouldn't have due to the Love Royale theming. I thought the main character could randomly leave routes, but then that wasn't the case. I did like the idol routes, which is kind of funny since I'm not a fan of idols themselves. It's kind of hard to complain because it's better be safe marketing wise, but without it going balls to the wall, I'll forget this title soon enough. I think Quick Hour is still a better case on this whole thing. For Temptation, I'm giving a 7 based on them going crazy with the sprite animations and them making the character charming. Otherwise, the plot is serviceable, but it becomes pretty campy halfway through, and I want to say that it was intentional, but who knows, but there's other scenes between them that are quite good, so I'd consider spikes of the quality are somewhat around an 8, but they're too infrequent to actually change the rating. It's actually closer to a 6 than a 7, but that's how it is. So for Chronicles of Refugia, it's weird to rate because it's only the first part. It has potential on the side, it's actually pretty decent in how they set the mood. The funny thing is that the main character or the main plot section was the weakest part it offered. It's mainly exposition so far, so it's hard to rate it. But also other titles like Higurashi and Mineko, and I think even, what was that one Moe game? I didn't like it all that much, but either way it was still fine and it worked for its one part. If it never got brought through anymore, it's like, yeah, this one part was still good enough. In this case, like, no, it's kind of shit because it really was all just exposition. So the main plot is like a 5 and the side route is like a 6 or maybe even a low 7. So for BustaFellows, I feel like it's more like a 7, but mostly it's an 8 with how consistent the quality is. There's some archetypes I don't like, but they're always going to be there because they're just popular and they sell well. And I feel like it's unfair to lower the score just because of that. Because again, it's just one route. Some routes were better than the other ones, but also felt like they weren't really going to be needed for the finale. Otherwise, I feel like the 8 would be totally justified, or even having a 9. There's some small issues that would be spoilers, but generally it's outshined by the quality of everything it has. Also, some fake points I'm not giving it, but it has a lot of English, and that's funny as hell to me. I think the common route was probably the best part of the VN. Then the ending, I guess, but the routes themselves were the lackluster parts. Only because I felt like it was really short. So Clockwork is a trilogy I put money in Kickstarter ages ago. The third one's out, but I'm taking a break from it because honestly it's just pretty average overall. There's a couple things wrong with it. And I think the thing people will complain about the most is side routes, and yeah, they generally suck, but I'm kind of fine with them and treat them just like fan discs for the characters because outside of like one detail in one route, there's no plot to them. Honestly, that one detail kind of spoils the main route in the second chapter a bit. But yeah, my main gripe is that it just feels padded. I could see this being around like 20 hours or so, and it's like 30 to 40 hours depending on your reading speed. I'm putting these two as a 6, and there's parts that I like, but I was bored more often than not. The Ushio sections are fine. They were done better in the second one than the first one, but also my brain just keeps saying that she has a 5 head because she does.